All right, 6 o'clock by my clock over here. So why don't we call the meeting to order and start with the roll call?
Neil,
Present.
David Droge, Jacques Livingston,
I'm here.
Courtney Michelle,
Here.
Andrew Stewart,
Here.
Liz Osborne,
Here.
Joe Long,
Here.
Councilmember Peck.
Here.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And great to be able to have our two newest members of the Transportation Advisory Board. You're part of a great team, and we're able to help the City of Longmont navigate in a good direction. Do you want to just maybe do a quick introduction for each of you, just so we can know just a 60-second overview of some of what inspired you to join, and a little about your background there. Liz, do you want to go first?
Sure. I have lived in Longmont for the past 28 years, raised my kids here. They're all grown up. Last one getting married this fall. And I decided that I was, at the beginning of COVID, I was doing some genealogy, looked at what my grandparents were doing in their lives at this age, and they were involved in their community, and I realized I needed to step up my game. So I signed up for this.
That sounds great. Awesome. Well, welcome. And Joe, you want to go next and give us a little 60-second overview?
Sure, give it my best shot here. So I've spent a lot of time, forgive me in advance, in California. I've been in Colorado for 21 years now, in Longmont for just about 11. As my wife says, I like to comment about things quite frequently, and said, why don't you actually go take action? And that's what brought me here.
Sounds good. Well, we look forward to your frequent comments.
Great.
Sounds good. Tyler, do you want to offer any words of wisdom there, or basic overview? What would be helpful from your perspective for the new advisory board members?
Sure, Neil, thanks for the opportunity. I think one of the big things is just to really help kind of navigate some of the big picture items that we see from the city. I think we've got I'd say city staff has a pretty good team, and these people you see on the call, Jim, Phil, other staff around us, we've got a great team here, so we're all professionals with what we do. So I appreciate some of the big picture guidance from this group and direction. So look forward to all of your participation this year as we move through this. And I think we've got some fun projects or some topics on the horizon here that you guys will get a chance to weigh in on and help shape some future projects in Longmont. So thank you all for your participation. Jim,
Awesome.
anything to add?
No, that pretty well covered it. Nice job, Tyler.
Jim, do you want to just introduce yourself there for those who haven't met you yet?
Yes, I'm Jim Angstad. I am the Director of Engineering Services. So I work with Phil and Tyler and Ben, who is somewhere in there. I think I saw him in here, for transportation, traffic, streets. And we have this evening, we have a CIP presentation that will go into next year. So hopefully we'll be able to bring you up to speed, provide you some good information about what we're looking at for next year and in future years.
Wonderful, thanks. And Phil, since you're an active member of the staff updates there, just give a quick welcome from your side there and a bit of background on the types of areas that you get involved with.
Thanks, Neil. Phil Greenwald, I'm a transportation planning manager, so we work more on the planning side than Jim and Tyler that do more of the engineering piece of it. But we all work on planning, we all work on the engineering piece, so we're all in this together, as they say. So, and Ben Ortiz also works as the transportation planner for the city. So all four of us are talking, as Jim said, often. So if you ever need anything, feel free to give any one of us a call. We're always try to be available. I wasn't very available to Tyler today, but we all try to be available to each other, so and to you. So feel free to reach out, emails or are probably the best way to get a hold of us if you have questions. If something comes up that you didn't really understand, or we used acronyms. We use a lot of acronyms in this business, so you'll hear a lot of TIP and STIP and CIP and Dr. Cog and CDOT. So if those things are just too much, feel free to stop us at any time. We kind of use them like it's a different language, and we kind of forget that not everybody knows our language. So let us know. And thanks about the maps, Jacques.
Awesome, thanks. And since we actually have, with our two new members of the advisory board, it's probably helpful for the existing advisory board members just to give a really, really brief introduction, maybe just 30 seconds to introduce. They're maybe starting with Courtney Michelle, just so that Joe and Liz at least know who else is on the Transportation Advisory Board with you.
All right. Hi, I'm Courtney Michelle. I've been on the Transportation Board for a year now, although we missed several meetings due to COVID, so I still feel like I'm new. So welcome to the newbie group.
Awesome, thanks. And in your day job?
I do hair as a living. Yes.
Excellent, excellent. David, do you want to go next?
Hi there, Dave Droge. I'm a systems engineer at Keysight up in Loveland. We've been here in Longmont for just over almost 20 years. And I also have a daughter getting married this fall, next month. And I'm an avid cyclist and enjoy being a member of this team.
Awesome. Thanks, David. All right, Jacques, let me turn to you, and why don't you give a quick little overview?
Sure. Hi, I'm Jacques Livingston. I've been on the Transportation Board, I think about a year and a half now. I don't know. It seems to have flown by. I'm losing track of the months. My day job, I'm a finance manager for the state of Colorado. Specifically, I'm with the Division of Child Support Services.
Awesome. Thanks. Sarah, next.
Hi, I'm Sandy Stewart, and I am retired. I'm very interested in transportation, whether it's walking or biking or driving or riding a bus. And so I'm just glad to be a part. I've been here about a year on the committee and been in Longmont about 32 years. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Sandy. Well, and for the two new members there, my name is Neil Lurie. It's a pleasure to have a chance to welcome you to the Transportation Advisory Board. I've been on the board now for 2 years. Jacques, I agree, it does go fast. And I've been involved in transportation issues for about 20 years, just as a curious citizen, increasingly getting involved in trying to help our communities make thoughtful decisions best that we can. My day job, I run a nonprofit in Boulder called Resource Central, and we help about 70,000 family members per year conserve natural resources, primarily water, energy, and reducing waste. So did I miss anybody on the Transportation Advisory Board? I think that was everybody. Awesome. So, and looking at the agenda that was posted there, it looks like the next step is the officers. I'm assuming that we're looking at the 2020 election of officers, not the 2019 election officers as in the agenda. Is there anybody who would be willing to step and help lead the Transportation Advisory Board, either as a chair or vice chair, into the next year? The silence is deafening.
I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion that Neil continues serving as chair, or at least no longer co-chair, and that Jacques becomes co-chair.
Co-chair or vice chair?
Or vice chair, next chair, second chair.
Second that.
I was going to volunteer for vice chair, so yeah, I'm good with that. And I think Neil would be great as chair.
I appreciate that. Any discussion?
I would agree with those two choices.
Okay. And Joe, it looked like you wanted to add something. Oh, I'm sorry, you're still on mute there, Joe. Okay. The ever-present mute challenge there, but the thumbs up sign is universal. I certainly would be. Joe, go for it.
One other thing real quick, if you need to chat, there's a chat function in the box as well. Anyone can communicate through that as well. If you want to type anything in a response as well, that works too. Thanks.
Well said. Well said. Great. I'm happy to help in that way if it'd be helpful for the advisory board. Any additional discussion before we vote on the motion? All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? All right, the motion carries. Thanks, you guys, and thanks to you, Jacques, for being able to support the advisory board with your leadership help as well. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks.
All right, so I think we have opportunity to approve the minutes. I was actually a little bit confused by the minutes because the minutes that I saw were to the June meeting. I did not see the July minutes. Did anybody actually see the July minutes in the packet?
Yeah, I just looked at it about 2 hours ago because I had the same. I had March minutes in mine.
You saw both in there?
Am I coming through okay?
I can hear you.
Okay. I had March minutes in my packet, but I downloaded and I have July, I think, in here now.
Tyler on Friday when I saw that the old minutes were in, that he needed to update them, and he did. So
Okay,
they came
great.
out later.
Okay, great.
Yeah, there was a mix-up. We had the wrong minutes uploaded Thursday when the email went out. Apologies for that. It was corrected Friday morning, so I should have sent a follow-up email to say minutes are amended. The correct ones are attached to the updated packet. So apologies for that.
With the mix-up, would it make sense for us to be able to? I'm not sure if there may be some other folks there that haven't been able to see the minutes just yet. Would it make sense to be able to seek to approve the July minutes during our next Transportation Advisory Board meeting there once others have had a chance to review it, or maybe it's a non-issue? Is there anybody else that hasn't had a chance to read the minutes just yet, aside from our new advisory board members? Okay, well then why don't we move forward? With there a motion to approve the Transportation Advisory Board minutes? All right, so moved by Sandy. Is there a second? David? Do you have a second with David there? All right, any discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye, or raise your hand. Any opposed? Abstaining? Okay, the motion carries. Nice to cross it off. All right, so communication from staff. Tyler, do you want to pick us up?
Sure. Normally, we've got a long list of items to talk about or share updates with items from staff. Not a whole lot tonight. One thing I'll add, our signal at Mountain View and Alpine, we've talked about many times. We're going to be turning that on here later this week. So getting that one done, excited to get that one done. It'll be good, even though school's not going to be in session to take advantage of it. It's still done and it'll be ready as soon as kids are back in school. So that's what I have. I don't think there was anything else from staff unless Phil or Jim wants to chime in here real quick, but we've got a pretty big agenda to get through tonight, so.
Okay, sounds good. If no other communication from staff, we'll go to the next agenda item there. Are there any members of the public wishing to be heard before we move forward? Okay, hearing none, we will march forward to the next agenda item then. Action item, looks like we have the capital improvement program. So, Phil, is that your baby?
Sure, let's have him do it.
Oh,
No, that would be me.
Hey, Jim, it's all yours.
All right, so we're going to bring up a short PowerPoint. If you consider 100 slides a short PowerPoint, except I gave it away that there's only 17. So we want to provide you some information this evening on the proposed 20 to 20. Oh, did I screw that up? That should be 21 to 25 capital improvement program, focusing on street fund and transportation community investment fee. All right, next slide. Tonight, we'll be asking for recommendations, two options that you recommend City Council adopt the funding from the Street Fund and Transportation Community Investment Fee Fund for the transportation projects as presented by staff in the 2021-2025 proposed capital improvement program. Or option two is to recommend City Council adopt the funding from the Street Fund and Transportation Community Investment Fee Fund for transportation projects as presented by staff in the 21 to 25 proposed capital improvement program with revisions recommended from the Transportation Advisory Board. So I want to start out with just a little bit of background on CIP, which is the Capital Improvement Program. It is a planning document that we utilize that covers the city's capital infrastructure needs over a 5-year period. We run it for 5 years, but it's important to note that anything pretty much beyond the second year is variable. It covers our capital projects, which involve new projects or new infrastructure or replacement of existing infrastructure or just improvements to infrastructure. And some of that infrastructure can be in the capital improvement program that goes in front of council beginning in September. Covers a lot of components. It covers water, it covers sewer, drainage. Does not necessarily, we will focus tonight on our transportation. So it's kind of a scaled down version. If you have any questions about other areas or components, we can always speak offline. Tyler and Phil are always available to answer all your questions about water and wastewater, should you have any of those questions. The CIP does cover our met and unmet needs. It is a dynamic document. It is subject to yearly or semi-yearly revisions. It should be fluid in that what we program in now for next year, a year from now, may have changed for some reason. So you have to understand that what we talk about today is subject to change and can be changed. So it is basically, as we indicated, a planning document. And what's really important also is it is coordinated with the city's operating budget. And we'll talk a little bit of that in some of the future slides when we talk budget. So how do we select our projects? They come from a variety of sources and a combination of sources. First and foremost is for transportation is Envision Longmont with our multimodal and our comprehensive plan, which covers the roadway system, transit system, and some of our active transportation, our bicycle and pedestrian systems. We also look to some of our master plans and studies, which can include our Longmont roadway plan. The Parks and Rec and Trails master plan covers some of our trails for some of that active transportation. We also have the enhanced multi-use corridor plan, which pushes for bikes and pedestrians. We recently, within the last 2 years, completed the Southwest Operations Study that covered a whole bunch of things, including cars, making room for buses, bikes and peds. Part of that, our CIP includes some of our asset management. With that, those plans aren't necessarily published, but we plan 5 to 10 years in advance for asset management, what roads we're going to pave, what concrete we're going to replace as part of those roadway improvements. Also, our bridge inspection reports on a 2-year cycle. CDOT inspects all of the bridges in the state, produces a document for our bridges. Currently, most of the bridges in the city of Longmont are in really good shape. We have one that is starting to show some signs of wear and tear, go into a structurally deficient phase. So we've included it within the next 4 to 5 years to start working on it. And then the last thing for CIP selection is, of course, funding. We're limited in what we can do, and funding does become a major player as we put together our CIP program. So in focusing on our transportation funding, the primary source is the street fund. That gets funding dollars from the street fund sales and use tax, state highway use tax, the automobile tax. Those are the numbers kind of broken out in that pie chart. And there's also, it's important to note that there is a miscellaneous category. And, you know, normally we kind of brush that over because it's only like $500,000. But miscellaneous includes grant funding. So the miscellaneous component is what's called intergovernmental, which is usually comprised of some type of grant funding, some interest income, some street cut dollars, permit inspection fees. This year, we have about $3 million, and that is made up of mostly some of the component of quiet zones, as well as Tyler went out and got a grant from CDOT. Turns out to be about $800,000, so that's in there as well. We get about some money also in the intergovernmental area from funding some of our operations, which includes our crossing guards as well, in an agreement with the school district. We did provide you in your packet a fund statement for the street improvement fund, and it shows pretty much our revenues that break out some of these dollars in that pie chart. And then it shows some of the projects as well as some of our operating. In that chart, you'll see that we dedicate kind of below our operating and maintenance is about $610,000 goes to fund transit. That includes the Longmont Free Ride, via the Flex Bus. So that is broken out within the budget. You can see that in that fund statement. So just some real quick, the component, $14 million next year's budget's coming out, coming from the sales and use tax. It is a 3/4 cent tax. It funds improvements and maintenance. A little history, initiated in 1986, but it was in a 5-year sunset clause. So it has been periodically updated every 4 to 5 years. And then in 2014, it was extended for a 10-year period. Last year, we went in and through a voter referendum, got a permanent extension, 2019. So we will no longer have to take those increments back every 5 or 10 years. That also enables us to be able, with a permanent extension of that, to be able to bond for larger projects out of the street fund. So just some quick project types that we program in. So they can be asset management, and we'll see one of those. I'll break one of those out in a few more slides. Could be capacity improvements, could be intersection improvements, safety improvements, multimodal, which involves missing sidewalks, trails, greenway connections, bike lanes, bridge improvements, traffic signals, or a combination of those, where we may, in the case of this year, where we're doing an asset management project on 9th Avenue, west of Hover, between Hover and Airport, we also are undertaking some bike lanes. Another example currently underway this year is also Pike Road, but Pike Road also includes a traffic signal. It includes some intersection improvements, some safety improvements. So some of our projects aren't just dedicated to one project type. They are involved over multi topics of project types. So just breaking out, kind of looking ahead into 2021 in our projects. We break it out. We have about 6 projects. That may not seem like a lot, but that total is about $16 million. So one project is and they go from our street rehab, our transportation system management, the Boston Avenue connection, railroad quiet zones, Boston Avenue Bridge over St. Vrain. And then we also threw in the St. Vrain Creek improvements. We have money from transportation dedicated to that project. And I'm glossing through that list in part because I've broken them out to talk about each one. So our street rehab program, this dedicates a certain amount of dollars for basically for the rehab of our city streets. Why is that important? We have 350 miles of roads in the city, along with 692 miles of sidewalk. So the program is our citywide program for asset management. It is data driven, wherein every few years we evaluate the condition of the streets through a consultant who does some radar analysis, does some visual inspections, drives through all our city streets, builds a data, helps us build a database that shows what conditions our roads are in. And then we take that tool, plan from it, what roads can we afford to repave. And it isn't just repaving, it's a combination of rehab. Some options, asphalt overlays, one option, crack sealing to extend the life of your asphalt, some chip seal in some areas, lesser expensive option that can get 5 to 10 more years of wear out of your asphalt, and then other preservation techniques on a smaller scale. It could involve complete roadway reconstruction. We're doing a little bit of that on 9th, where we got the road open and the whole base course is falling apart, have to rebuild some of the road from the bottom up. We also include concrete repair. So whenever we go in to rehab a street, we also look at what the condition of the sidewalk is, the crossings, the ADA compliant curb ramps. We make sure everything's up to code, meets current standards. And that is the physical work out in the field is contracted services for that work through a contractor. And we, every 2 years, put that contract out to bid, as well as our concrete work as well. So one of the bigger ones in terms of kind of the amount of work we do is our TRP 11, which is the Transportation System Management. This covers a lot of our safety, multimodal, and some of our minor capacity issues. Some of the projects we're currently working on is the Sunset Road Diet. We are looking at that right now. That project is going to be kind of a challenge because Phil is currently working on a grant, which while we don't currently have money for construction in the future years, we have an opportunity to chase a grant. If we get that grant, that will change that project, maybe move that forward for construction a few more years. We also have the 9th Avenue multimodal improvements. I mentioned earlier the section of 9th Avenue from Hover to Airport. We're also looking at a road diet from Hover to Main Street. That may involve some striping changes that can provide some bike lanes in that area. So we're currently in the planning stages, and hopefully we'll be able to execute that next year. We always have school safety improvements. Prior to the start of school, we do some evaluations in and around our schools to make sure that the pedestrian areas are safe for our kids. And so we may have to throw some of those in. We always have funding for that. We also look for funding for new traffic signals. Currently, we're looking at 66 and Alpine, or possibly Clover Basin and Fordham. Those are close to meeting warrants. So at that time, we want to be able to have funding available should they meet warrants. We always have some funding set aside for neighborhood traffic mitigation. That's one of our current ongoing challenges with residents in some of these local neighborhoods where they get some complaints about speeding through their neighborhoods. We have a program that looks at that, where we can work with them to mitigate some of those challenges. We also have high crash intersection improvements. based off of our crash report. We're currently looking at 3rd and Alpine as a intersection that may need some improvements. We've had some higher level crashes there, and then also. And Tyler may have to jump in at this time to tell me what an HSIP grant is. It's the grant we got from CDOT that covers signal improvements, number of intersections.
Sure, Jim. Highway Safety Improvement Program. And really what we did, it's federal dollars available. The focus of this pot of money was primarily roads not on the state system. So we looked at a lot of the intersections where we have a lot of left turn crashes that could potentially be mitigated by some type of left turn protection. So we're seeing more and more of the flashing yellow arrows, love them or hate them. They do have a proven safety benefit to them. So that's a big part of what this grant will do, is to allow us to install a handful more flashing yellow arrows. It'll also install backplates on some of the signal heads to help make them more visible. A lot of times sun glare can be a contributing factor in some of those crashes where the signal head is washed out with sun. And adding that backplate around it just helps to maybe shield some of the sun, so you have a better chance of seeing that with your eye to catch the signal head. And it doesn't sound like a big cost item, but add it all up, it's going to be I think Jim mentioned before, it's an $800 and some thousand grant from CDOT. We have a component of match. Its total project's a little under $1 million. But we also have to replace a few signal poles to be able to get the distance we need to get the left turn arrow in the right place. So combination of new signals, a couple locations need new cabinets, new poles, and some wiring. So it all adds up in the end. But yeah, pretty excited to be able to get some dollars for it and hopefully see some benefits from it.
So real quick, I'll carry on talking about some signals. So I threw out some miles of road in the city. I threw out miles of sidewalk. It's also important to note we have 97 traffic signals in the city of Longmont. After next week, we'll have 98. And then later on in the fall, we'll have 99 because we have 2 signals under construction. We've got 68 school flashers, 2 pedestrian flashers, 4 fire station flashers, 49 radar signs. On our signals, we've got 5 PTZ cameras. That's pan, tilt, zoom. It enables us to monitor traffic at several of the higher traveled intersections. So you throw this all together, and it starts to add up in terms of kind of the maintenance needs. So, you know, I love capital. Everyone thinks capital, thinks improvements, thinks what we're going to do to, you know, widen a road, build a bridge. That's the fun stuff. The grind is the maintenance, but that's what keeps your residents moving, whether it be through cars, bikes, pedestrians, keeps them safe. Sometimes you can make an argument this is more important sometimes than widening a roadway, because this is what people expect from TAB and from council and from city staff, a sound infrastructure so that they can get from point A to point B without, sometimes stopping at a red light. I'm sure Tyler's heard that any number of times. He said they've hit too many red lights. So one other thing to add on our traffic signals, I think a good portion of them are on, about 55 of them are on a intelligence system that communicates with it and can move traffic faster. Areas like over 119 Street, they are all connected. Okay.
So yeah, all of our signals are all connected. We can control them all remotely from our desks. Basically, the part I think Jim was talking about was adaptive. So all along Hover, Ken Pratt, and Main Street, all those signals are running what we call adaptive control. So they don't have a fixed timing plan like a traditional signal, but they're more adjusting to real-time demand of traffic.
All right. So next slide. So one of the other projects we're have been working on is the TRP 92, which is the Boston Avenue connection, which will get a new crossing at the east end of Boston Avenue, down by kind of down off of Price Road. Will connect into across the tracks. New east-west collector ties in for the BRT connection for the future First and Main Street project. Currently, we're undertaking some conceptual design this year, going to final design next year for construction the following year. Coordinating with BNSF and PUC, and it is coordinated with the Quiet Zone project. BNSF requires that for every crossing that they will approve, the city has to, or the municipal agency has to close 2 other crossings. So it's coordinating with our railroad quiet zones, and that we're closing several crossings there to create quiet zones and also to help us get this crossing. So we have some conceptual design currently, and we're working on some property acquisition now. So it is a pretty interesting project.
And I think if I can, Jim, don't mean to steal it over here, but in terms of importance of this project and some of the things to consider with this one, this ties in ultimately to the First and Main transit station that's going down southwest corner of First and Main. And this is the preferred route for that BRT. I say, Phil talked about acronyms earlier, so I'll try and explain them as I can. Bus Rapid Transit is working with RTD to get a faster bus service here to Longmont. And this was their preferred route, was coming down Boston to make this connection to get right into that transit station of First and Main. So it is an important collector connection for the city. Also has implications on the future bus system as we talk about this one.
That brings us to quiet zones. In the last few years, council has heard a lot from our residents. They initiated a program wherein we had undertaken a study, and they approved some funding in the budget to undertake some design, get started in construction. And then to leverage our dollars, the city went out and was able to obtain a grant from the Federal Railroad Administration to make this project more viable. It is an $8 million project. We got a $4 million grant. Currently, design is underway. It will create quiet zones at 16 intersections throughout the city, and a quiet zone could include closing a crossing. So we are working towards getting to construction. Originally committed to have construction going on at the tail end of this year. But that pesky grant got in the way, and when someone wants to give you $4 million, you want to make sure you get everything right. So we're looking at construction in early 2021 to include and start at the 3rd Avenue crossing. Have been working with BNSF. We're working with the PUC, and currently we are finalizing the FRA grant agreement and should be bringing that in front of council in September or October for their consideration. And if you have, if Tyler wants to add anything.
I think one thing that I would say about this, and early on, that's what can this board do? I think this is a good example of, here was something that the TAB over the years, previous boards really took up as an issue and really made this one of their priorities. And I think we're seeing the results of that from them being persistent in pursuing an issue that, hey, this has made it to the top of the priority list, and we're able to get it done and move it forward. So exciting seeing how the TAB was able to influence that, and exciting on a personal level to be able to get this done. It's a great project for Longmont. I see Joe's question here, what constitutes a quiet zone? Good question. So quiet zone is sort of misleading that it's not a silent zone. We're simply looking to eliminate the train horn. So there's still the noise. Trains by themselves are noisy. They're big, large metal vehicles that absolutely make a lot of noise. What we're trying to do is implement safety measures so they don't have to sound the horns at each crossing. Typically what those treatments are going to be some type of gates, medians, flashers, A handful of treatments are required at each crossing to replace the safety lost by blowing the horn. In the eyes of the FRA, Federal Railroad Administration, and BNSF, the horn is the most effective safety device possible. It's very loud, as we all know. We can probably hear it through the extensive town. It's instant feedback. It's easy for the operator to know, confirm that it's working. So failure rate is pretty minimal. So that's what a quiet zone is. If you have any more questions, happy to talk with you more about that.
Great, thanks.
So next project, TRP 118. That is the Boston Avenue Bridge over the St. Vrain. Both the graphic below and the photo to the right is the view kind of from the trail or from the creek looking west. So this project design is currently underway. Construction to begin later this year or early 2021. This project is critically important because it'll expand primarily the channel out, widen the bridge, lengthen the bridge, so it'll pass the 100-year flood. But it also serves as a financial match for the Army Corps of Engineers project, which is upstream of this structure. It will provide improved flood protection for the area and enhance the ped and bike improvements as well. And then if we want to jump over to the next slide. So I wanted to also throw in, we throw in about $30,000 a year for DRN 31 Resilient St. Vrain project from the street fund. And so kind of why is that important? Why is it in a transportation update? Well, part of that project, we're finishing one of the last bridges previous in the graphic you see in front of you from kind of the right going left, City Reach 1 and 2A, those portions in kind of the yellow and in the red are complete. City Reach 2B is under construction. That includes the crossing of the BNSF Railroad Bridge over the creek. We're starting an Isaac Walton design is underway. Phase 2 is the Army Corps. Tomorrow night, we are taking an agreement in front of council for their consideration that has a partnership with the Army Corps of Engineers for them to design that one reach and then actually construct it as well. So they never do anything for free. So part of our match, it's $15 million project, is that Boston Avenue Bridge project. What's important with that is that they are actually doing all of the work for the design and construction, and they're not just handing us a check for the work, they're actually going to do it. Takes a load off of staff, and we can continue moving the project forward. The Hover Reach to the west is still kind of in the evaluation stage, although we are currently doing a cost benefit analysis so that we can apply for a grant this fall, which hopefully will get us working towards the next phase. So back to my original statement is, why is this important? Well, Resilient St. Vrain also does have a trail along it, which is part of what the $30,000 helps with. But it's also important that we replaced several bridges. So when you have a waterway flowing through your city and that is subject to flooding, nothing will wreck your transportation system like a flood. So if you're not prepared and your bridges can't carry that 100-year storm, when it occurs, and it will occur again, we will be able to weather it in a resilient, safe manner and keep our transportation system, keep our emergency vehicles moving, keep our pedestrians, keep our traffic moving through our town. So that's kind of the importance and why it was included in this presentation. So some of the challenges, and there you can add to this list. I'm sure there's many more. Some of the things we want to note is with our street fund, with our transportation network, and with our TCIF, is we constantly see changing public needs for transportation. We were driving earlier this year towards pushing more people into buses, working on a train system, and then the COVID-19 hit. And that chased everybody away out of public transportation for the short term. So we have to get back to that because that will take a lot of the stress off of our transportation grid and our network of getting people out of cars, into buses, onto bikes. One of the other challenges is the funding of the local transit service. Okay, increasing costs. We see ride free going up. We see the VIA service, they are constantly asking for more dollars. FlexBus has increasing costs as well. So that's the funding challenge. Quality of life challenges, whether it's traffic mitigation, congestion management throughout our city. Climate change will add a component of that. Changing dynamics of, again, going back to the first one, moving people out of cars. What's that going to look like for our changing transportation system? Believe it or not, the street system is still growing. There is development coming in throughout the city that will add to that they will build certain roads for their, so that they can, build homes, then turn them over to the city. That is part of our growing system. City's really not building new roads, but developers are. Our roads are aging. Okay. Part of that TRP1 is kind of addresses that, but as those roads age, we have to provide a good quality product for our residents so that they can get to their work, to play, to and from wherever they can. Under COVID, which are some of the impacts. The biggest impact to COVID will be to our budget. It isn't just the short term we saw in a downturn in the sales and use tax. We have projected that our revenues into next year, while our economy recovers, will decrease. So we're already looking ahead for future years that we're going to lose about $3 million worth of revenue out of the street fund. If that doesn't come into play, then we may have an opportunity to take on some projects that are currently unfunded. We won't know that until partway through the year. Right now, we project our revenues. We anticipate a decrease in those. So we've adjusted accordingly with this capital improvement program for the next 5 years. So one of the last challenges, but I didn't list here, go back, is the slide to the right. Go back, come on. You don't have questions. Is the intersection of Hover and 119. So the challenge we will face is that we partnered with Boulder County, CDOT, and put in a grant for a $26 million project. So in the coming months, we should hear whether we get that project or not. And if the grant is approved, then we have to figure out how to move that project forward. So, Phil, any questions? You applied for the grant. It's all your fault. So with that, I can open it up to questions. And then the last slide after questions goes back into the options for recommendations.
All right. Thank you very much, Jim. I appreciate that. Any clarifying questions or comments from any of the Transportation Advisory Board members?
I have a question.
Go for it, David.
So thanks, Jim, for the overall look. Briefly, can you tell us what projects we've reduced funding on because of the expected reduction in revenues?
Ooh, I'd have to work up that list. We took out, we had some missing sidewalks as a project, some components of that. We took that out. We also took out EMUX. In the next year, we reduced our TRP1. We also reduced.
What's an EMUX, Jim?
I'm sorry, EMUX. Enhanced Multi-Use Corridor. Thank you, Phil.
Thank you.
So we didn't have a lot of money dedicated to EMUX next year, but we took that out. We took our missing sidewalks out. We cut down TSM, the Transportation System Management. So in future years, 2 years out, we probably wouldn't be planning for any traffic signals. We reduced, like I said, some of the paving dollars. We pushed out a couple of projects. As opposed to doing them, we delayed them rather than cutting them out.
Thank you.
Great. And Jim, by the way, there was a question that Jacques listed in the chat section there. Do you see that there? Or do you want Jacques to recap it?
Is that the TRP appears to show an increased gap in funding versus need over the next 5 years? Any plans to close that gap? That'll just depend on what we do with funding. So we can look at, no one likes to hear about it, into next year as we prep for the future years. We can talk about a rate increase. That is, in this atmosphere currently with COVID-19, people out of work, that would not be anything I would recommend. I think we have to get past that, get an economy back to normal, get people's lives back to normal before we could look for that. One way to offset the gaps is to constantly be pursuing grant opportunities that we can, if we have fund projects on the books that we can move forward on, if we get a grant for them, that can free up city dollars that can be shifted over to other areas.
Thank you. That answers my question. And I just want to congratulate you on working with the Army Corps of Engineers. That's a great way to leverage other resources. And I kind of get the feeling when I look in the next couple of years, you know, kind of our base need, the number of miles of roadways, the maintenance costs, the traffic signals, that base level looks like it's increasing. And I don't know, I could be wrong, but it just looks like we might have some slimmer choices on new development as we take care of our existing assets. Is that pretty accurate?
Yes.
Okay. Good work. This is great.
Great. Any other clarifying questions or comments? Yes, Sandy?
So we're going to be making a recommendation to City Council. Is it based on what you just showed us, or is it based on the 25 different projects that we were sent by Tyler? Tyler sent in our packet.
I'll have to ask Tyler what 25 projects are. But we're focusing kind of on the next year's CIP is what we presented tonight, the critical components. The fundscape and the 21 to 25 CIP program covers a number of projects several years out. So we're looking at basically this next year. Because in 2 years, if we get additional funding, the 2022 CIP projects may look totally different.
Just clarification of the projects that were included in the packet. Those are all of the active transportation CIPs, all the CIPs that have street fund dollars going into them is what's included in the packet. It's a combination of funded, partially funded, and unfunded projects that you'll see the sheets for. So there's definitely some in there that are unfunded. Clearly, we don't have the money to do those right now. The funded ones, I think, funded and partially funded ones are the ones we're really looking at right now. I think unless there was something that TAB had questions or concerns about, we could look at the other ones.
Tyler, actually, before you jump on, or Jim for that, I guess probably better for Jim. Quick clarifying question: are there existing grants that you think are similar to the 119 Hoover interchange that significantly shift our activities? Are there any other major pending grants that you think we have a decent chance that could have a probable chance of shifting our list here?
The grant I think currently that will may adjust some of the dollars here there would be the Sunset project that I think Phil's looking at a grant now for that. That is a project currently that we had in our budget under TSM earlier in the year. We kind of took it out, put it on hold for now, but knowing that there's a grant available, we've been able to look at ramping it back up. And sometimes grants are challenging in that, they usually always require a match. It just depends on what it is, but they're also they're limited. Like CDOT, in this case, CDOT has dollars for use for grants. Unfortunately, it has to be kind of tied to the CDOT roadway system. So in this case, we've been working on Sunset. That was a road diet we finished last year. That kind of fell into it. That's the only project that kind of applies. You've got other, and what you also have to look at is in future years, and with the budget noted in the fund statement, is we've got a lot of things going on. Okay, even though there's a kind of a what we anticipate a downturn in the economy, in next year, in that intergovernmental item, in that fund statement, we got $12 million coming in. Okay, and the reason for that is we're going to be doing Kaufman Street improvement. So that's a $6.8 million grant. We're working on 66 under grant dollars now. So there's a, you throw in the RSVP stuff where we're constantly trying to leverage our dollars. RSVP is kind of a really good success story because we're taking on what is basically over $100 million project. Right now we've spent about, I believe we've invested about 85. And over half of that is with federal, whether it's Army Corps, whether it's FEMA, whether it's HUD. The city residents have only had to pony up through bond sales. I think about 40% of that. So
excellent. And
that's
just to
what we're
clarify,
constantly trying to leverage our existing city dollars. We're trying to be responsible stewards of the limited resources that we have. So it is constantly a challenge.
Thanks. And just to clarify, RSVP, I assume that's Resilient St. Vrain Project?
That is the Resilient, again, like EMUX, it is an acronym, sorry. It is the Resilient St. Vrain Project. So,
great. All right, I know we have still have a full agenda. Any additional clarifying questions before we seek a motion?
And we can always, if you have questions after the fact, we're always here. Email, it's always best, or call us. We will certainly be able to provide you more information should you. And then the full budget will be going in front of council in September for their consideration. That includes the CIP. So, Joan, I'll be seeing you again in a few weeks when I do the whole CIP with everything, including what some of these slides you'll see a repeat.
Great. Well, I think there was what Jim presented. The main questions are ultimately, do we seek to be able to provide the Transportation Advisory Board's endorsement recommending in support of the staff recommended capital improvement projects, or is there a compelling need to be able to make any amendments there? Is there a motion that anybody would like to entertain? Sandy?
I so move that we accept the plan that Jim just proposed to us this evening to the City Council.
Great. So a motion. Great. So just to clarify, Sandy, so you're making a motion to be able to support the staff recommendations for the capital improvement programs as presented.
Correct. As presented, yes.
Great. And I second. Who is that?
Yeah,
right,
Jacques, a second.
Great. Any discussion? You wanted to add a comment on that?
I do. Can you put the options back on the screen? Yeah, I just had a, if Jim could explain that second option, what that last part was, just so everybody understands it. I don't understand it.
So the basically the only difference between the two options is in the language. In the second option has the proposed capital improvement program with revisions recommended from the Transportation Advisory Board.
Okay, thanks for explaining that.
Great. And Jim, if you can put it back to the view before, just so we can see everyone's votes more easily instead of a little strip on the top of the screen here.
I think Tyler's driving it. There we go.
Thank you, Tyler. Great. So we have a motion to support the staff recommendations for the capital improvement program. We have a second. At this point, are there any additional comments for discussion? Okay. All in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All right. I think that makes everyone there. Anybody opposed? Any abstaining? All right. Well done, Jim. The motion carries.
Thank you all.
All right. Well, I think, far be it from us to not want to make sure that we're thinking about capital improvement programs looking forward, but without looking back here, looks like there's some updates looking at 2019 capital improvement program. So Tom, Micah, and Tyler, you're up.
Neil, I think there's a chance you may have an older agenda in front of you.
Okay. Well, then we'll disregard that one.
Next thing we had on here, info items, was a work plan update, if that's what.
Perfect. Perfect. I just pulled the link there, so forgive me for the outdated information. All right. Work plan.
So each year, January, we usually sit down and meet and talk about the upcoming year's work plan. As we've got 2 new board members, new chair and vice chair, good opportunity just to put this in front of you to see some of the things we're working on, we've worked on, and a good opportunity if there's things on here that you want to make any minor adjustments to. Understand that this year's been a little different than normal years. COVID's definitely had an impact on the meetings we've had. We've really gotten direction from our city manager to minimize these meetings if there's no real action items. So as we've tried to condense and really make the best use of your time to really bring items to you that we need an action on. That said, I'll give you an opportunity if you've seen this or want to talk about it, if you want to make any comments. Happy to talk about that. Otherwise, the information's there if you want to look at it and see kind of where we're going through the end of the year. Neil, I think one of the things that you wanted to talk about was traffic mitigation. So it's still on there. We'll still have another sessions dedicated to that to talk about that and maybe some potential updates to that program. Anything else? I think really this is one of the bigger things that this group does every year is the recommendation on the CIP. It's a pretty important program that the service that the city provides. So appreciate you guys' feedback on that as well. With that, if there's no questions, we can move on to the next item. If you have questions, feel free to ask.
I said a quick one, Tyler, and it's not so much of an addition. It's more of just kind of echoing the RTD. I've heard now a couple of times that our transportation buses around town. I think we really are going to have to look at that over the next 12 months. I keep hearing about Flex Ride, costs going up. We have the Ride Free Longmont, costs are going up. So I see it's on here, and I'm just kind of echoing that I think that's going to be a good one for us to really dig into and try to figure out.
Well said. Jacques, just clarify, is that related to proposed changes to the work plan or just clarification that when we have the discussion, it's important to do our due diligence?
It's kind of to put a star next to that one on the work plan.
Great.
My comment is more on just, I'm just hearing more and more importance on that, and I'm glad to see it on there.
Great. All right, any other comments or clarifications on the work plan? All right, do we need a motion for the to approve the work plan for the coming year?
I'm not looking for a motion at this point. We took the motions in January. We approved the work plan, and it was either January or February meeting. I think now it's definitely, in light of all the changes we've had, there's probably an opportunity to make changes if we need to, but not necessarily need a motion to revamp this thing here.
All right, Tyler, let's keep marching forward to the front range passenger rail activities.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
I was going to quickly introduce Spencer.
Yep, go ahead, Phil.
Sorry. So next on your agenda is the front range passenger rail front range passenger rail service program, and they've got a interesting. This is kind of an interesting program that really shows how we can possibly do passenger rail in the future. And so we're going to turn it over to Spencer, and I see Randy Grauberger is on the phone as well. So both of those gentlemen have been working on this for a number of years, and I'll turn it over to Spencer to talk more about kind of what's going on with this and kind of the promise that it holds for the future.
Bear with me for a sec. I'm getting your slideshow loaded up.
Sounds good. In the meantime, Phil mentioned, my name is Spencer Dodge. I'm the liaison with the Southwest. It's a legislatively created entity a few years back. Randy, I think Randy Grauberger is on the phone as well. Randy, if you're there, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm Randy Grauberger. I'm the project director for the Southwest Chief and Front Range Passenger Rail Commission. And we'd just like to thank you folks for giving us an opportunity tonight to give you all an update on what's going on with the Front Range Passenger Rail Project.
There we go. Great. So we'll go ahead and dive in. We've done many of these presentations up and down the Front Range over the last year and a half or so. You may have seen this information, some may have not. On this slide, you can see kind of commissioners that make up our body. One key note here, a change over the last few months, is the addition of DJ Mitchell. He is the the Vice President of Passenger Rail Operations for BNSF Railway. He just came on board about 5 weeks ago. These are some of the other members of the commission. Next slide, please. So the Southwest Chief and Front Range Passenger Rail Commission is kind of a two-pronged mission. Starting off, this was originally the Southwest Chief Commission full stop. And that work was to preserve Amtrak Southwest Chief service across Southeast Colorado down Trinidad, La Junta. A couple of years ago, the legislature did add the minor task of facilitating the development of front range passenger rail service as well. So kind of have two missions there. The vision that has been developed over the last several months with the help of stakeholders up and down the Front Range is seen here. So really developing passenger rail service that serves Front Range communities, Pueblo to Fort Collins, is a critical component of Colorado's future, providing a safe, efficient, and reliable transportation option for travel between major population centers along the Front Range and create a backbone for connecting and expanding rail and transit options in the state and region. So a little bit more complex than just commuter rail, a little bit more strung out along this 180-mile corridor. Throughout the project, we're keeping close tabs on the federal agencies and in coordinating with its federal agencies. We don't have a lead agency identified yet, quite simply because we don't quite know where the alignment's going to be. So we're working really closely with Federal Railroad Administration, Federal Transit Administration, and the Federal Highway Administration. We've had 3 different calls with those, most recently in April 2nd, beginning of April. Next slide, please. Okay, we also received a CRISI grant that we applied for back in October of 2019. You see here, this is the Southwest Chief through car service to Colorado Springs feasibility study. You might say, well, why am I telling you about a Southwest Chief? You guys are up there in Longmont. But this is kind of, we view this as a potential kind of first usable option for Front Range passenger rail. So in partnering with CDOT and Pueblo County and La Junta and Colorado, the Colorado Rail Passenger Association, we successfully applied and received a $225,000 CRISI grant. And this will look at some of the different alignments and operating procedures for that Southwest Chief through car service. Next slide. Thank you. Well, you guys actually, I'm outlining this with my mouse, but you can't see my screen. In that bottom southeastern corner of Colorado, yes, down there. That solid line is the current alignment of the Southwest Chief. That dotted line is the potential rerouted or through car service on that Southwest Chief. That's what that CRISI grant is going to look at. The big solid blue line, corridor that we're looking at specifically for Front Range passenger rail. It's a really thick line currently. We don't really know where exactly the alignment is going to be, so we don't want to be too prescriptive. So just to give you kind of a visual of the corridor north to south that we're talking about here. Next slide. I feel like I'm moving quickly, so if anybody has any questions, please feel free to interrupt me. It won't hurt my feelings one bit. Mentioned earlier that we've been working with stakeholders from Fort Collins. Yes, correct. CRISI does stand for Consolidated Rail Infrastructure and Safety Improvements. That 2019 grant, it's not specifically an improvement, but there is a track in there that provides for planning studies and operation studies. So that's the kind of big same pot of money that comes from. Good question. Stakeholder engagement. You know, with the 180-mile corridor, there's a lot of context, different communities, different problems to solve. So we didn't think it prudent to kind of have that same conversation all at once every single time. So we broke this up into 3 different segments, north, central, and south. This is really to provide project information and obtain feedback at a local level. So you're looking at regional and local stakeholders here. We have our next round of those mid-September, 15th through the 17th. I think we're going to start, Randy, correct me, that Tuesday should be the north, and then Wednesday should be the central. And Longmont's in a particularly interesting location. Some of your context relates closely with Boulder and RTD in the North Line, and then also with Fort Collins and getting back and forth between Fort Collins. So that's kind of, you guys are slotting in kind of in both north and central sometimes. But so keeping in mind that it is a 180-mile corridor, it's important that we do have corridor-wide conversations. And so we also have been holding corridor-wide. We held one of those early December, late last year. And we're going to hold another one in early fall this year. And this is really to kind of look at stakeholder-based recommendations for cohesive and quarter-wide project decisions. Those kind of big overarching questions. Next slide, please. So in this planning process, there's many steps. And we just recently wrapped up kind of the first level 1 evaluation in this initial alternatives analysis, moving it into level 2. So level 1 was really, what are the possibilities? What can we do? What are the options? Once we look at those, we kind of weeded some of those with fatal flaws and impossibilities out, and have moved into level 2 evaluations. And how do these alternatives compare to each other? And then after that, we'll issue a notice of intent and advance to NEPA. Next slide, and I can talk. I think the next slide will be yes. On that level 1 evaluation. So we started by reviewing a lot of the existing studies of existing freight rail and highway rights of way. You know, we really wanted to make sure that we weren't reinventing the wheel. You know, there's been a lot of work, a lot of homework done over the last few decades, looking at front range passenger rail in many different ways. So we didn't want to ignore all that work. So we kind of took all of that and made sure we're considering all of the previous great work that's been done. So in those corridors, looking at the freight rail corridors, Union Pacific and BNSF Railway, you guys are intimately familiar with, as well as some of the highway corridors along I-25, E-470 around Denver, and US 85 as well. So the engineering done was to often optimize alignments to improve speeds or minimize impacts throughout the level 2 evaluation. So we already have that work done. That work is, I think, all the way done, completed at this point, as we are in level 2. And the goal was really to understand how the existing freight rail and highway horizontal and vertical geometries, physical locations, and right-of-way availabilities can interact with or support adjacent passenger rail systems. We also looked at corridor travel times, broadly estimating those, giving existing and future populations. So some of the corridors that we looked at, there's 2 in the south that be along I-25 in the I-25 right-of-ways, as well as in that BNSF freight corridor. There are 2 in the north segment, the BNSF corridor as well, and then again the I-25 highway rights-of-way. And then there's 4 separate ones in the central segment. That includes the E470 route going around Denver, I-25, the freight corridors, and Randy, help me out. I'm blanking on the 4th one. I have it written down here.
The 4th one was the basically the alignment that was evaluated during the North I-25 commuter rail update back in 2015.
Yeah. So again, playing on some of the homework that's already been done in the state of Colorado. And really, our engineers work to optimize and refine these, looking at geometric refinements such as smoothing out some of those curves along the south. A lot of that was vertical as well, less so in the north segment. I think, although when you get up to the Big Thompson Canyon, there's a river, there's some of that work as well. But really wanting to understand the highest activity station areas, where are these big usage stations going to be, and how can we connect those to give us the best ridership and the best service along the Front Range. So these next few slides, these are, I don't think that we can overstate these enough. These come from Amtrak. Amtrak has proposed a capital grant program, which could really help to fund the initial Front Range passenger rail service. So what they're proposing is investing $2.3 billion of Amtrak money, of federal money, structure. And then over the course of the first 5 years of that operation, slowly 20% each year, shifting that towards a state-supported service. So this looks like, really connecting Fort Collins, Boulder, Denver, Colorado Springs with some of those intermediate stops in between, and really kind of providing a big injection of capital funding to get us going here. On this next slide, I think the next slide is the, yes, so again, this is another map. You can see some of these intermediate stations, Loveland, Longmont, Littleton, Castle Rock, the Air Force Academy. Guys, Longmont is indeed on there. And you'll notice, many of you will, that alignment certainly does look a lot like the RTD line that has been in the works for, well, maybe since before I was born. I'm not quite sure on the exact date. But again, this is kind of the alignment we're looking at. This is what we've been focusing on as well. And then the next slide is just kind of a very 2005, not quite since before I was born, not that young. And so you can see this is kind of an initial, just for example purposes, just kind of the timetable. And I have a question, and I'll address that real quickly. But for example, this is what they're kind of proposing as the operating service. A couple trains southbound and then a couple trains northbound as well per day. When do you expect to find out if you may be likely to get an Amtrak grant? So that grant is contingent upon the appropriations bill for fiscal year 21. It was passed in the House and it's sitting in the Senate now waiting on a conversation around that. We're not sure. We really don't know. Hopefully that gets passed before the November election. Certainly before we get too deep into the 20 or even fiscal year 21 budget needing to be done. So we're not sure at this point. We do know that September 30th. Yes. So what's that? 5, 6, 7 weeks now, I think. There's some other bills you may have heard that the Senate are looking at right now and trying to get passed. So they'll have to get to it eventually. But I just don't know if we're going to be in there or not. We do know that Amtrak has singled out the Front Range Passenger Rail Corridor Nashville to Atlanta, I think the Virginia Triangle, and then the Texas line as those are their 4 priorities right now. They really want to focus their capital money on that as far as the national network goes. So we are a priority for Amtrak. They've talked with us many, many times. Randy and I had to sit on this information for several months, and it was very, very difficult. But yes, we can let the folks know now that Amtrak really wants to focus on these medium range corridors, front range passenger rail being one of those priorities. Puts us in a good position, given that we're already along the process of planning out both capital and operating, kind of where we want front range passenger rail to go, kind of jumping ahead of that. Next slide, please. And want to leave you off with a bit of stakeholder engagement information. Many of you have seen these numbers. We have, these were both of these surveys done last year. The online Metro Quest was an opt-in. We had close to 7,000 respondents and really, really strong positive numbers. 95% of respondents believe passenger rail service could help address transportation needs. 92% would be interested in using the service if it were available. I think it's remarkable. This was an opt-in survey, so we might have been preaching to the choir a little bit. But even so, getting 92% agreement and 95% agreement among almost 7,000 people, I don't care what the question is. It's going to be really hard to do that no matter what. So we recognize that was an opt-in and not so scientifically valid. So then we commissioned a scientifically valid survey, 600 responses. These are all likely voters. And what we really were interested in was, what's the ballot appetite for this? So we asked very general, broad questions. Would you support a front range passenger rail service project that would have regularly scheduled train service to major population centers, Fort Collins to Pueblo? 81% supported that. Only 12% opposed that to a certain degree. And then we asked kind of the big question. Everybody says, oh, well, how are you going to pay for this? Did you ask about sales tax? So we asked, generally speaking, would you support or oppose a sales tax increase to fund a front range passenger rail service, regularly scheduled train service between Fort Collins and Pueblo, with an estimated cost of $5 billion? Now, this $5 billion number, it's a very, very, very high level estimate that we really only use for purposes of asking a question. And so that was about 61% total support, which was really key. Our pollsters there, nobody's really ever polled these kind of ballot questions for a front range passenger rail service. And given at the time the lack of publicity and marketing and stakeholder engagement we had done, they were shocked. They couldn't believe that we had such high support. I do see a question there. Is there data regarding forecast passenger volume? That's one of the efforts that we're undertaking right now through this survey. We should have, certainly by the end of this year, I hope, should have some of those initial ridership modeling numbers, but we'll get that soon. Don't have it yet. And I think that is probably the last slide I have. Yes, so again, Randy is our project director down there. If you have any questions, email him or myself. We do have a front range passenger rail specific website. You can get all kinds of information there, a little more detail on the things that I've talked about tonight. Randy, I think I heard you in there. Did you want to leave any other final comments, thoughts?
No, again, just thanks to all of you in Longmont. I know you and Phil Greenwald especially has been a champion for your community about this project. I was involved in the North I-25 commuter rail update back in 2015. I was the project manager for the consultant team at that time, and that's when I got a chance to know Phil pretty well. And now, as in my new role as project director for the commission, it continues to be a real pleasure working with Phil and the other folks in the Longmont area. So don't be shy. Continue to give us opportunities to provide updates to this group or others within the Longmont area. That's what they pay Spencer and I to do. So please don't be shy. And again, thank you for the opportunity. And if you got any more questions, unless you need to move on with your agenda, Spencer and I are here to answer some more questions if you have anything.
Great. We have time for one or two questions there if there's something top of mind here. Yes, Councilmember Peck. Oh, you're on mute there.
Thank you, Tyler. I just wanted to know, and I put it in the chat, if we can get a copy of the slideshow from Randy or.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you,
I
Randy.
can make that available to you.
Okay.
I've got it, and I can send it out right now.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Easy enough.
All right, any last questions? Yes, Sandy.
I'm just curious, do you have any idea what it would cost to go from Longmont down to, let's say, Denver?
As far as cost and actual ticket price or cost to build?
Yes. Well, both, but no, a ticket price.
You know, in the next kind of phase of planning, right now we're doing a very general, we need to just figure out where we're going to put this and how we're going to run this. But then we're going to move into the kind of those very, very specific operating questions. You know, how much is this going to cost? What's the ticketing structure going to look like? What's the fare structure going to look like? So I don't have that number for you quite yet, but that's kind of in that next stage of planning.
Okay, are you going to be able to use any of the existing rails that, let's see, the Burlington Northern, the freight rails, or are you going to have to build additional rails to run this train?
Yes and no. I think it depends geographically where you're looking at. In certain places, you know, the only option might be to run on the same freight lines. In other areas where there's a little more space, we might be able to build kind of a third track to focus just on front range passenger rail. So I know that's not a very specific answer either, but it's kind of all of the above.
Okay, thank you.
This is Randy, and I'll jump in right there too. Again, are very fortunate to have both BNSF and UP as members of this commission. And we've had 3 really good sit-down meetings with just the project team and the Class 1 railroads, the latest being just last Wednesday. And again, both Class 1s are very cooperative, and I think by us bringing them into this project early, they are committed to trying to find a way to make front range passenger rail a reality. So we're very fortunate in that regard. I know BNSF got beat up quite a bit in their discussions with RTD on Northwest Rail. We've actually got a meeting set for next week with Bill Van Meter with RTD. Bill is also one of our bosses on the commission. He represents RTD, and we're going to sit down with Bill and his staff and start having additional conversations about how front range passenger rail can partner with RTD, not only in the North Corridor projects, but also coming up through the Southwest Corridor. That's going to be a key access point for front range rail to come into Denver from the south from Castle Rock. So both Southwest Corridor and Northwest Rail are going to be good opportunities for some kind of partnerships with the RTD. So we're looking forward to those conversations.
Spencer and Randy, thank you very much for being able to educate us about some of these long-term plans. These are indeed looking far ahead there, but they only become a reality if we start making plans and thinking about it now. So we'll all keep our fingers crossed on some of the funding opportunities and keep us posted as we go forward.
Okay,
thanks so much for having us, guys.
Thank you.
Great. Looking forward on the agenda there. It looks like we're at comments for board members, if I'm looking at the right agenda this time. So we'll just go around in the order that people happen to appear on my screen. So Sandy, you are up first on any comments from your side?
Yes, I'm really impressed with the front range passenger rail, that perhaps they could get something done that we haven't been able to do with RTD to get the rail up to Longmont and down through the front range. But back to the CHIP program, I really appreciate all the work that went into it. I read every single one of those 25 proposals, and the thought, the maps, the whole connection with whether it's a comprehensive plan, Envision Longmont, whatever it might be, just appreciated how they wove everything together. I was sad to see so many things unfunded, but but I know that we're working towards getting things funded. So thank you all for your work and the projects that you've done. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Sandy. Courtney, do you want to go next in the comments from board members?
Sure. I'm also very excited about the potential for rail. I'm glad to hear that R&D is in communication with the other groups. That was one of my questions, whether they were involved in that or not. So very excited, and echoing Sandy's statements that there's a lot of work going into all the projects that have been going. I mean, some of the dates on those projects date back many years that they've been ongoing, and just nice to see that they're still always in progress as it would be. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. David, do you want to go next?
Sure. I don't have anything new to add. I certainly appreciate all the work that Bill, Tyler, and Steve are doing to pull all this together, especially with our changing funding streams that we're having right now.
Challenging times indeed. Yeah. Thanks, David. Chuck, you're up.
All right, thank you. I guess I'll echo the rail service. Sounds really encouraging. I've lived in 2 regions where we've had north-south regional rail through Amtrak, and they both have worked very well. So I can just throw that in there. The latest area I lived was the Vancouver, British Columbia to Eugene, Oregon, north-south, which is very similar. It goes along the I-5 corridor. And I've used it many times. And yeah, so I'm encouraged by what I've seen in the past. And if that same model could work here, I think it would be great. So beyond that, I just want to say thanks to our staff for getting that traffic light in at Alpine and Mountain View. Very encouraged by that. I've been watching the progress for the last couple of weeks, so thank you. And then also just a quick shout out to Jim for that presentation. Very detailed, a lot of information there. And, you know, there kind of comes a time when you look at your experts that you have on staff and you go, yeah, he knows so much more than I do about all the nuts and bolts that are going into this. And I trust that this is the right decision to make. So just thanks to our staff. They do a top-notch job and try to balance between taking care of our assets that we currently have and looking for future developments in the future. So that's all I got.
Well said. Thanks, Chuck. All right, to our new Transportation Advisory Board members, just a little bit of context here. In this section of the agenda, we usually just reserve some time if there were either any transportation issues of special note from your perspective, any follow-up on past issues, any clarifying questions, or things you've seen around town that you thought would be helpful to bring to the attention of our talented transportation staff. So, Joe, I'll start with you. Welcome, and I can hear you just fine there. Any comments that you want to add for the good of the order?
Well, I think from my perspective, there's a tremendous amount to unpack. From a commentary standpoint, love the presentation. Great information, helped a lot. Don't think I'm really in a position at this stage to contribute or add a lot of comment, but give me time.
Sounds good. All right, Liz, any questions or comments on your side?
I really want to echo what everybody was saying about the wonderful work that staff did. And also, I found that Front Range Rail presentation fascinating and exciting. And that really was it.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Only comments I'll add is just to reinforce the point that we really do have, or fortunate in Longmont to have some really talented staff members on the transportation team. And it gives us great confidence there as they're presenting the issues they've done their due diligence on different issues. What I would encourage, especially for new transportation advisory board members, our window of time oftentimes goes faster than the time allows for. So as you're thinking of different comments or clarifications during presentations and over the next year or two or three, really encourage you and everyone for that matter just to really be thinking about, what are the one or two most important issues to be able to raise, because certainly for every topic, there's an opportunity to ask clarifying questions that can get into the weeds there. So I'll do my best to make sure that we can end our meetings on time, but I definitely encourage everyone to really think about how to prioritize the questions so we can get to the most important issues. With that, I'll hand it over to Councilmember Peck.
Thank you, Neil. I just want to reiterate what everyone said. I think we've got the greatest transportation department, and they're so easy to work with. And I love this board. I have to say I do. You guys, you care, and it really comes through. But I want to give a real fast update on what's going on with RTD, if you don't mind. The RTD board has whittled it down to 3 finalists for the director, and they're going to be giving videos, because we're in this COVID craziness, that will be available to the public, and you can comment on them. They're 3 women who are all incredibly qualified for the position. We don't know yet when those videos are going to be made and available to the public, but what I would like is, if you feel as passionate as I do about the rail, to make sure that when they are being considered for this position, that they understand how important the rail is to us, whether it's partnering with the Southwest Chief and Front Range Rail, or finishing our line. The other thing is, I think I asked for a letter from the board about the FISA account, the Fast Tracks Internal Savings Account, that you support keeping that whole and not putting it out for a bus operation. So I want to thank you for that. And it looks like they are, the board is leaning toward keeping that whole and not taking it. But there is one point that was new to me after working on this for 5 years. It was new that there is, I think it's called the rubber tire fund or option, where money is taken out of the Fast Tracks fund for bus operations. And the board is considering over the next few years, it's about $20 million a year. So that should have been the Fast Tracks fund all of this time, which would have been a huge portion of the cost of all the unfinished corridors. So that is being contemplated, to keep those dollars coming out at the cost of $20 million a year. We need to keep on top of that and see if the board is actually going to do that. I know they're in a huge funding crisis, but these are 2 different funds that we voted on. So that is a good thing to keep that. So RTD, through Governor Polis and Faith Winters and Matt Gray, have formed an RTD accountability committee. And this committee is to do a deep dive into all aspects of RTD, for the management, for funding, for financial revenue, whatever. So just FYI that is they had their first meeting yesterday, or today, this morning. I'm getting my days mixed up. I also met with Randy Grauberger a couple of times and Bill Van Meter, and I'm very excited about this Front Range Southwest Chief. And from my conversations, it looked like, unless that's changed, that the Northwest Corridor would hook right into that. When you saw that on the map where it kind of made that triangle into Longmont and Boulder, that was part of the Northwest Corridor. So we need to keep on RTD to finish that. And just as a venting, I am frustrated with RTD in that they have that the Southwest Chief and Front Range Rail has the BNSF director that we've been trying to get communication with for all these years, and they have got him on their board, DJ Mitchell. So that frustration, as soon as I saw that, I thought, are you kidding me? We've been asking RTD for 5 years or more, please get us in contact with DJ. So that did happen right before COVID. They went to Fort Worth and had that big meeting. So I'm hopeful that this will all come together, but our city does need TAB to be part of that support group and advocacy. So I want to thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thank you so much. All right. Well, in the last few meetings, we've had opportunity for people to keep others in the loop about transportation-related meetings. Any info on upcoming transportation meetings on the radar?
I don't have any at this point. Phil, do you have anything coming up with Kaufman?
Nothing with Kaufman, Tyler, but I did want to mention that there's been some, meetings that have been happening for what's called the first and final mile along State Highway 119. And unfortunately, all the English speaking ones are now complete, but there is on Wednesday at 5 o'clock a Spanish only speaking event that's open to the public. And it's really kind of a new idea during this time of COVID, where it's really difficult to do kind of translation services as easily as maybe you could with with a group of people in more of a open house setting, where you could ask people if they're more comfortable in Spanish speaking, and then be able to speak to them directly. And so we're going to try this out. It's going to be interesting to see how it works. And so we put the invitation out there. It's been on a number of different stations. So if any of you are hooked into the Spanish speaking community in Longmont or along the corridor, quite frankly, it'd be great to get the word out even better than what we hope we've done. But this will show us something for sure. It's going to be a good proof of, is this something that could continue, and is something that's needed. And I hope there's a trust level that's there, that's built in as well, that this is something where you can feel very comfortable, just as most of us would in an English only kind of presentation. So the English ones went very well. There's probably twice as many more people that attended than we usually get for an open house. So we had 2 of those. One was an evening one, like the 5 to 6 that we're going to have Wednesday for the Spanish speaking, and the other one was a noon, kind of a lunch hour meeting. We had 70 at the evening one and 35 at the lunch hour one. So that is probably about twice as much as we get. So this format's proving to be quite effective for people coming to participate. It's much easier, right? You're right in your house and you can just turn it off at any time, or you can stay tuned in and ask questions. And there's some fun little survey things that happen on your smartphone and things. So we're watching very carefully. So as we start the Kaufman Street project, which will hopefully start before the end of September, that we are doing the same kind of outreach and hopefully getting more and more people to tell us what they want in that corridor. And that's a busway corridor from 1st to 9th. It's fully funded with a federal grant. And so we're going to start design again before September 30th will be the kickoff. We need to start spending money before the end of this fiscal year, federal fiscal year. So that'll happen, and then that will happen. And then in the fall, you'll start to see the public outreach events probably before Thanksgiving, and it'll probably be again in this format. And if we can transition early next year, spring of next year, we're hoping to go back to some of the more traditional formats. But I think you all understand where we are on that.
Great. Appreciate that. Awesome. Well, on our items for upcoming agendas, I see that we have Traffic Safety Fund, Countywide Sales Tax, Front Range Passenger Rail, Neighborhood Traffic Mitigation, and Crash Report. Tyler and Phil, do I have that right? That's all happening next meeting, or is that happening in upcoming meetings?
This would be upcoming meetings, not necessarily all next. And Front Range Passenger Rail, we missed the update on that one as well. That was tonight, so we won't be doing a check.
Sounds good. Well, we have lots to look forward to. Great to see all of you. With that, we'll call the meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thanks, Neil.
Thank you.
Good job.
Yeah, thank you, Neil. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Good job, Neil.
Thank you, Neil. Have a good one. See you all next month.